Up and running. Good to see everybody. Y'all happy to be here? That's just one of them shaking nod. Thank you, April. At least we have one person who looks like they're happy to be here. All right, now I know you're going to be happy to be here. All right, we'll go ahead and go through. We're going to start off like we did last week. We'll do the 17 time periods, and then we'll kind of quickly go through the second cycle for the first 6 periods, which you're working on right now, and then we'll move forward. So obviously this was kind of a combination of making sure you knew cycle 1 and cycle 2. But I mean, look at how many answers I already gave you. That's pretty. What's that?
I said I had an extra blank out.
Uh-oh.
Whether I missed it or you.
Miss Shirley done found a mistake then. Francis?
I didn't realize we were going to the 6th. I thought the 5th.
You really got a bad teacher. He needs to communicate better.
Well, I just really messed up my grade now.
All right, well, I'm not going to take them up. We are going to go through it, and I want you to make sure you got what you got right and mark what you got wrong. Obviously, we're slowly, progressively working through this, and we'll go over this again multiple times. Obviously, we'll hit it again with cycle 3, but we're going to go through it again even tonight, so don't be too worried. We're going to get there. This is a marathon, not a sprint, all right? So the 17 time periods, I already give you the first one, so go ahead and give me the 17 time periods. All right, so we're better than we were last week. We're not going to win any awards for being in sync. And I still see there's a little bit of confusion on some of them, so keep working on it. We're going to get there. All right. By the time we get through with this quarter, you're definitely going to have the 17 time periods, right? All right, so I'm not going to make you go backwards tonight, but just be prepared for that maybe next time too. All right, cycle 2. So this gets to your quiz then. So what are the events that go along with the first period in cycle 2? All right, so creation of the world. It's number 1. Adam and Eve in the garden. First sin. Cain and Abel. And the generations of Adam. So did everybody get that one right? Or missed one. All right. That's not too bad. What chapter in Genesis is the generations of Jesse Jackson? He's ready to go. He won't give me a high five. I like that. All right. So the second time period, the second cycle, what we got? All right. So we've got the flood itself. Meat given for food. Law of capital punishment, the rainbow covenant, curse of Canaan, and fast forward, generations. All right, did everybody get that one? All right, missed one. I mean, I'd give you at least half credit for that, Norm. All right, so what chapter is the generations of Noah? 10. Marissa's going to give me a high 10. All right, don't forget that. All right, scattering of the people, cycle 2. All right, so the first one's Tower of Babel. What was the next one? Language is divided. And fast forward again. So we've got the generations. This is the generations from who to who? Shem to Abraham. So just remember that. That gets us from Noah all the way to the next time period. So that one's just 3. What chapter is the scattering of the people? Genesis chapter 11. See, you already got cycle 3. Everybody get this one? See, Lena, that's when you say thank you. You are too kind. All right, so we move on from Shem now down to Abraham with the patriarchs, and so What are the ones that we're remembering for cycle 2 with the patriarchs? All right. Everybody got that one, right? Yes. That's it. All right. This kind of a gimme. All right. So what books of Genesis is the time period of the patriarchs? 12 through 50. All right. Or somebody might have said 12 to the end of the book, which is 12 through 50. All right. So that takes us through the patriarchs, or the story of Joseph, works us to the next time period, which is the Exodus. And so what are the events for cycle 2 that we are remembering for the Exodus? First one. All right, so Israel is in bondage. Moses' birth. All right, raised as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Rejected by his people. All right, Moses flees to the wilderness. Burning bush. All right, the plagues. Crossing of the Red Sea. Trip to Sinai. All of the events at Sinai. Trip to Kadesh. All right, they spy out the land. And they refuse to go in. All right, how'd you end up with that one? Got all of that one? Good job. Anybody miss? I don't even remember how many blanks I got on that one. I guess I can look at my sheet. There were 6 blanks. Did anybody miss 3 or more? Oh, look at that. All right, we'll get you next time, Mr. Ray. All right, so for the most part, we've got the first 5 pretty well figured out. All right, so 6 is one that we haven't spent as much time on. We did go over it last week, and when I hinted at it, Gil made sure to let everybody know he's going to have a quiz on this. So the 6th one now, so they refused to go in, so then they were punished, and we start the wandering in the wilderness. So what are the events that go along with cycle 2 with the wandering in the wilderness? All right, so they're sentenced to wander. All right, we've got the rebellion of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. All right, Aaron's rod is budded. Miriam dies. Sin of Moses and Aaron. Passing by Edom. Aaron dies. The fiery serpents. All right, so you've got 2 there, the conqueror of Sihon and the conqueror of Og. I think I gave you them because that's a little hard to remember. Then you got Balaam. Fornication with the Midianites. What was that, Miss Shirley? So that's right. Before the slaughter, and that's a little hard because your mind would automatically think the fornication and they're going to receive their punishment. But between that, we've got the second census. What was the purpose of the second census? That make sure that all of the men of war had died. And at that point, had they? Man, y'all are too good. That's yeah, that's So we've got the second census, and then what comes after that, Miss Shirley? All right, so after that, we have the slaughter of the Midianites. And what comes next? All right, speeches of Moses, which we see in Deuteronomy, and then Moses' death, cross the Jordan, and then the last one is observing the Passover. All right, you missed one. See, that ain't bad. So how did that? You missed one, Norm? All right. Brother Waldron, I don't think he thought we needed to keep up with that one, but obviously it's at the beginning, whenever they're wandering in the wilderness, so they can have a record, and then when they take the second census, they know that everybody has died, with the exception of Joshua and Caleb. All right, get your Bibles and turn over to Numbers chapter 22. So I want to talk just a minute here about this slaughter of the Midianites, and just based on something that I had mentioned in class last week. So I'm not sure if you remember, but whenever we were discussing this, Norm actually mentioned I don't know exactly what he said as far as the slaughter of the Moabites, but he mentioned the Moabites. And I corrected him and I said it's the Midianites, which is what we need to remember here. And so our good brother Nate came up to me afterwards and showed me a passage in Numbers. And to be honest with you, I had forgotten all of the story around it. So I do want you to remember this is the slaughter of the Midianites. But the question that may come up is, are the Moabites and the Midianites the same group of people? Why are both mentioned here? And so in Numbers chapter 22, and this is where it actually mentions Moab, at least in one place. So let's start right here with Brother Ray and just take two verses apiece, and let's read verses 1 through 7.
Numbers 22.
Numbers 22.
And the children of Israel set forward and pitched in the plains of Moab on the side of Jordan by Jericho. And Balak, the son of Zipporah, saw all the Israel had done to the Amorites. And Moab was sore afraid of the people because they were many. And Moab was distressed because of the children of Israel. As Moab said unto, I've done run 3.
That's all right. Go ahead and read a couple
The
more
Lord
straight.
said to the elders of Midian, now this company will lick up everything around us as an ox licks up the grass of the field. But Balak, the son of Zippor, the king of the Moabites, at that time, then he sent messengers to Balaam, the son of Beor, at Peor, which is near the river, in the land of the sons of his people, to call him, saying, look, a people has come from Egypt. See, they cover the face of the earth and are sitting next to me. Therefore, please come at once, curse this people for me, for they are too mighty for me. Perhaps I shall be able to defeat them and drive them out of the land, for I know that he who you bless is blessed, and he who you curse is cursed.
So the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the fees for divination in their land, and they came to Balaam and gave him Balak's message.
All right, so there in verse 7 we see the elders both of Moab and the elders of Midian. I turn over to Numbers chapter 25. And let's take 3 verses apiece. First, if you want to go ahead and start with that, and then we'll move back. There's only 18 verses, so we're going to read all 18.
When Israel lived in Shittim, the people began to whore with the daughters of Moab. These invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods.
2 or 3 verses.
3.
You want her to do another?
So Israel yoked himself to Baal of Peor, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel.
And the Lord said to Moses, take all the leaders of the people and hang the offenders before the Lord out in the sun, that the fierce anger of the Lord may turn away from Israel. So Moses said to the judges of Israel, every one of you kill his men who were joined to Baal of Peor. And indeed, one of the children of Israel came and presented to his brethren a Midianite woman in the sight of Moses and the sight of all the congregation of the children of Israel, who were weeping at the door of the tabernacle of meeting.
When Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, saw it, he arose from the midst of the congregation and took a spear in his hand. And he went after the man of Israel into the tent and pierced both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman through the body. So the plague on the sons of Israel was checked. Those who died by the plague were 24,000.
Go on. 10, 11, and 12.
And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, had turned back my wrath from the children of Israel, because he was jealous with my zeal among them, so that I did not consume the children of Israel in my zeal. Therefore say, Behold, I give to him my covenant of peace, and it shall be to him and his descendants after him a covenant of an everlasting priesthood, because he was zealous for his God, and made atonement for the children of Israel.
The name of the slain man of Israel who was killed with the Midianite woman was Zimri, the son of Salu, chief of a father's house belonging to the Simeonites. And the name of the Midianite woman who was killed was Cosbi, the daughter of Zer, who was the tribal head of a father's house in Midian. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying,
Bring trouble to the Midianites and destroy them, because they bring trouble to you by their treachery with which they have deceived you in the matter of Peor, and in the matter of Cosbi, the daughter of a prince of Midian, their sister, who was killed on the day of the plague that happened as a result of Peor.
So the Moabites, the Midianites, they're not the same group of people. The Moabites actually biblically are mentioned as sons of Lot, born of incest with his daughters. This is back in Genesis chapter 19. And then the Midianites, they were descendants of Midian, one of the sons of Abraham, through Keturah, and we read that in Genesis chapter 25. So they're not the same people. They obviously were both involved in the situation here. And judgment came on them for obviously enticing Israel to sin with the women of Moab, and also a Midianite woman there named Cosbi. So in reality, God placed judgment on both lands, since both were part of the original consultation there with Balaam, and they both followed through with Balaam's advice and enticed the Israelites into sexual sin and obviously eventually idolatry. So thank you for pointing that out, Nate. And you may be thinking, okay, well, why are we doing all this? What's the big deal? Well, I'm hoping now you're not going to forget that. And so, and if you look right after that, chapter 26 says the census of a new generation. So this is again cycle 3. And so you've got Numbers chapter 25 here. We're talking about the fornication and the slaughter. Go ahead, Todd.
Just a question. You said that God judged both Moab and Midian. Is there a place where it talks about him judging Moab as well?
No, I think it's specifically mentioned, but I'm just saying the results of what happened was because of both Moab and Midian. I mean, it's specifically cursed. Midian is the one that's cursed, but you see both Moab and Midian actually involved in the sin. So, you know, the destruction or the punishment was specifically given to Midian, but they were both involved from the very beginning that we see there with the elders in chapter 22.
Isn't that where Moses moved down to 40 years?
Yep.
Midian and married?
And Jethro was his father-in-law.
Yep.
The wise priest of Midian, who gave him the advice about, hey, reorganize your guys so you don't do everything on your own.
So it is the slaughter of the Midianites. And so I had specifically just said something, but Norm had mentioned Moab, and then Nate had brought that question up. So it's just, obviously we're going through the story of the Bible. There's a lot of narrative here, and I thought this was just interesting because I told Nate, I was like, honestly, I got to go back and look at it. And I had forgotten about the connection with the Moabites and the Midianites there, even with Balaam. So, all right, so moving on with cycle 2. We briefly talked about this last week, and so we'll get into it again this week. So with the invasion and conquest, so when we ended off there with the where they had come to the promised land, they observed the Passover, and they had already crossed the Jordan. So what was the first thing that they did whenever they crossed the Jordan? What was their first battle? All right, so they have a battle with Jericho, and so I mentioned, so the land of Canaan is kind of like a long, tall rectangle, and think of it divided up into 3 sections, and so where would Jericho be within that? So kind of in the middle, in the central part. And so we talked about how they took Jericho, and after they took Jericho, I think that they probably got a little bit haughty, a little bit proud, and they're thinking, well, I mean, this went pretty easy. It seems like they didn't realize the reason that they were able to take it so easily was because of God. And so they send 3,000 men to Ai, and what ends up happening there? What's that? It did not go well. That's right, it did not go well. What was the problem? All right. And who was that attributed to? Achan had taken some of the consecrated things and had lied about it. And so his family, his possessions, they were stoned and they were burned in the fire. And then they were able to defeat Ai. After that, they staked their claim in Shechem, and they once again renew their covenant with God. And so they kind of defeat the central area. And then where do they move after they defeated the central area? They move to the south. And so they fight the kings of the south. They end up making a treaty with the Gibeonites. Were they supposed to make treaties with people? All right, so why did they end up making a treaty with the Gibeonites? Deception? Yeah. So they dressed up in rags and said they were from, we're not from around here. That's right. Then they end up fighting with the kings of the south, and it's during this time period that, let me make sure I get this right, that God made the sun stand still at Joshua's request until the enemy was defeated. So that's kind of a cool event that we see that takes place whenever they're actually on their southern campaign. All right, so they've got the central, they've got the south. Obviously, there's just one part left, so they go up to take the kings of the north. And in Joshua chapter 11, verses 14 and 15, it says, "And they did not leave any who breathed, just as the Lord had commanded Moses his servant. So Moses commanded Joshua, and so Joshua did. He left nothing undone of all that the Lord had commanded Moses." And then in the same chapter, Joshua 11, now in verse 23, it says, "So Joshua took the whole land according to all that the Lord had spoken to Moses, and Joshua gave it for an inheritance to Israel according to their tribal allotments, and the land had rest from war." So that's Joshua chapter 11, again, verse 23. So they've got the central, the southern part, they've got the northern part, and Joshua 11:23 says that the land had rest from war. So what was the intention of the land? What's that? Wipe out everyone. And we know obviously that they did not do that, and so we're going to continue to see problems. Obviously, we just talked about it a little in depth there with the issue with the Midianites and the Moabites, and so they did not do that. But God had promised them a land, so we see now the fulfillment of that promise. And so what happens with the land now at this point? All right, so the land is distributed, it's divided up amongst the tribes. Jesse? Go back.
So I know there's a Jacob, king of Hazor, during the days of Deborah. Is there a Jacob mentioned in chapter 11? Let's see, Hazor.
Let me look at Brother Bob Waldron's notes.
There it is, the first verse. It came back with the king of Hazor. So we either got two kings by the same name, the same place. Jacob, king of Hazor. Then come to Judges chapter 4. That's who Deborah. Barak fought against. All right, you can move on. I didn't mean to derail this. I was just curious because as soon as I saw Jacob, king of Hazor, my mind went to Judges. I'm more familiar with the reference there than I was here in Joshua.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's another one. I'd have to look into it. Go ahead, Todd.
One thing about what you mentioned about how they were supposed to wipe out everyone. The land distributed among the tribes was kind of the way they were supposed to wipe out everyone. the campaign was never intended to wipe out everyone, it was just to neutralize the strong armies. So they hadn't really disobeyed yet. The distribution was kind of the method to exterminate the rest.
Yes. So before they ever crossed over, or when they crossed over, there was a group that didn't necessarily want to go along, and Moses had convinced them that they were going to go and fight. So after the land is distributed, then they actually return home. And then we see a couple of situations where Joshua is challenging the people. Obviously, Joshua 24:15 is a passage that probably most people remember quite well. So Joshua 24, he challenges Israel to keep from idols and to be faithful to God. It actually is chapter 22 or 23. That's not 24. Chapter 24 is where Joshua challenges Israel to choose whom they will serve. Obviously, he said, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." But what was the response of the people? All right, so the last thing that we see here then with the invasion and conquest is that they renew their covenant with Jehovah. All right, so because they didn't completely annihilate the people of the land, they get into this cycle. And what was this cycle that they end up in? The judges cycle. What was the judges cycle? Oh, man. What was that, Mirza?
The nice phrasing or the one that we remember?
Wait, what did you say?
The nice phrasing or the one that we remember?
Oh, the nice phrase. No, tell me what you remember. The toilet bowl. Okay. Yeah, I must not have been in that class because I don't remember that one.
Because every time they came back around, they went a little bit lower and it got a little bit worse. And the circle got a little bit tighter.
Okay. Hey, however you need to remember it. Okay. However you need to remember it. So after those who remember Joshua had died, there was another generation that arose who did not know their past. And so we have this cycle of the judges where they get involved in idolatry, and God allows them to be punished. And they come to a realization at some point, okay, we need to turn back to God. So they do. God sends them a judge or a deliverer, and there is a time of peace, and then the cycle continues. Wash, rinse, repeat. So, how many judges were there? I heard 13. I had 14. What? Anybody want 15? So there are technically 14 judges. There are 15 that are discussed. One of them is not a judge, but he's called a leader, Abimelech. So the first one is Othniel. Man, I got to do better with my animations here, so you're not going to see any right now. So the first one is Othniel. Obviously, there are certain judges that we have quite a bit of information on, and there are others that we really don't have very much information on. There's just 3 or 4 verses. So Othniel is the first one. Anybody know who the second one is? Ehud. What do we know about Ehud? All right, he's left-handed. He was messed up. He killed the fat guy. I'm just kidding. My sister's left-handed. So, all right. So Ehud, he killed. Who was the fat guy? Eglon. Norm, you know where he was from? Yes, he was. All right. So after Ehud came who? Shamgar. What do we know about Shamgar? He used kind of a weird tool. And what did he do with that? He killed 600 Philistines with an ox goad. All right, after Shamgar we have Deborah. All right, what do we know about Deborah? She was a woman. I'm going to put that on a quiz. What do we know about Deborah? She's a woman. Yes, she is. What's the big story, though, with her and her commander?
They
Put him in the show.
without her, so she went out.
All right, Barak and And they needed to go to war. And he said, well, I'll go if you go. She said, I'll go, but you ain't going to get the credit. Credit's going to be because of a woman. And what woman was that? Does anybody remember? Jael. Yeah, drove the tent stake, like not just pierced the temple, but like straight through all the way to the ground. Yeah, so who's after Deborah? Gideon. All right, what do we know about Gideon? All right, so he went down to 300. What did he start with? 32,000. And did it just go straight from 32,000 to 300? No, he basically gave people an option. Look, you can go home if you want to go home. And at that point, there were about 22,000 that dropped out. So it left him with 10,000. God said, no, it's still too many. And so eventually it got down to 300, and they obviously were successful with the 300. So after Gideon, the next one isn't the judge, but a leader. That's Abimelech. After Abimelech, Tola. After Tola, Jair. After Jair, Jephthah. What do we know about Jephthah? The rash vow is what we remember from Jephthah. After Jephthah, Ibzan. Next, Elon, Abdon, Samson. All right, we obviously remember Samson and all the stories of Samson. Who's after Samson? Eli. And who did Eli raise? Samuel. Samuel was the last judge. And so we remember it was during Samuel's time that the people requested to be like the lands around them and requested for a king. And so just try to start remembering them. And I'm just going to go ahead and throw the rest of them up there. We'll look at this more next week, and we'll talk about it. But you've got the story of Micah, the Levite's concubine. And it's actually during this time period that we have the book of Ruth. So there was a lot of war during this time period, but we have a period of peace there with Ruth. What's the significance of Ruth? Yeah. Who did Ruth and Boaz, who did they beget?
Eventually David.
All right, before David? Obed, and Obed beget Jesse, and Jesse beget David. All right, so we'll pick up with here, and we'll keep moving forward. Thanks, everybody.